Welcome to today's program, and we have a very extraordinary guest that many of you will know. In fact, all of you should know, Pat Boone. And usually Pat talks about his extraordinary career. Pat, I understand, except for Elvis, you were the biggest selling artist in the States for quite a while.
Yeah, in fact, really around the world in the record business, you know. He and I were friends. We were friendly competitors, two Tennessee boys who knew that we were very, very fortunate and could hardly believe what was happening to either of us. Well, thank God I had an 11-month head start on Elvis and 3 hit singles before we first met, and that was in Cleveland, Ohio, when he wound up at that moment being my opening act. It was a sock hop, 3,000 kids in a big gymnasium in Cleveland. Nation's #1 disc jockey, Bill Randall, was hosting it, asked me to come in from New York. I had just moved to New York with my wife, Shirley. We just had our second baby, Lindy. And I was enrolled in Columbia University, but I came down to Cleveland at his request to headline this sock hop. And he met me at the airport, brought me in, and he said, I'm going to pick up a guy in a little while coming up from Shreveport, Louisiana, a young kid. He's appearing on the Louisiana Hayride, a country show, a radio show. And I said, who is it? And he said, Elvis Presley's his name. I said, oh, Bill, I've seen his name and heard his record on a jukebox in Dallas. He's a hillbilly. You think he's going to go over? Well, this is rock and roll time. Smiled. He said, well, RCA Victor just bought his contract from Sun Records in Memphis, and they think he's got something, so we'll hear. The record that he had made, the A side of it, was a Flat and Scruggs bluegrass song called Blue Moon of Kentucky. Huh. And the record was sort of a regional hit, and that's why he was appearing in a country music setting, and why I thought he was a hillbilly. So backstage at the high school when he came in, I was there waiting already to be introduced to these 3,000 kids that were dancing all over the place to current records. And he came in with 2 or 3 guys, always had a little entourage. And I held out my hand. I said, hello, Elvis, I'm Pat. But he says, nice to meet you. I said, now Bill Randall thinks you got some good things ahead for you. I don't know about that, but I hope so. And he just leaned back against the wall there and seemed shy, like he didn't, kind of diffident, didn't know what to say. And his buddies kind of closed in around him. So I didn't try to keep talking at that point. It was about time he was introduced. Bill Randall brought him in on stage, said, this is a young kid, new contract with RCA Victor. We'll hear more of him in the future. Let's welcome young Elvis Presley. Well, out he came, and he sang, Blue Moon of Kentucky, keep on shining. Well, the kids, they found him interesting, but not that song. They a country bluegrass song. Yeah. They liked him. I could tell that. I was watching from behind backstage. So then he finished that song. They gave him a nice, polite reception. He says, thank you very much. Now, I had another side on that record, and I'm going to sing it for you. I hope you like it. And he sang, that's all right, Mama, that's all right with me. And that was more rhythm and blues, and they liked that. Wow. And when he finished, he said, thank you very much, and he left, and they wanted more. Well, then I followed him. Yeah. Thank God I had 3 hit records.
What were the 3 hit ones?
2 Hearts, 2 Kisses, which was the first. That was in March of 55. Then in May or so, we came up with the next record, which was Ain't That a Shame. Yeah. Fats Domino's classic, went right to #1. My record did. Sold 1.5 million immediately. The 3rd record came out in October, right when I was meeting Elvis in Cleveland. And it was a song called At My Front Door, or everybody knew it as Crazy Little Mama Come knocking at my front door, door, door. And so that was the one that was getting the screams, Ain't That a Shame, as well, because they were hits. So I came off stage, and Elvis was gone. So we didn't see each other for maybe, a year and a half. And we were now both signed to 20th Century Fox, movie contracts. His dressing room was only 2 doors from mine at 20th. In between us was a lesser-known actor named Cary Grant. So it was me, Cary Grant, and Elvis in 3 contiguous dressing rooms. And then, we visited back and forth in each other's leased homes in Bel Air when we'd be there making movies. So eventually I could say, you know, that first night we met Elvis in Cleveland at the sock hop, you looked like you were very nervous. He says, well, I was. He said, I didn't know how to talk to you. I said, why? Yeah. You were a star, man. I said, a star? I had 3 records. I'd only been recording since March. He says, yeah, but you were on the charts. I didn't know how to even talk to you. So he got over that in a big hurry, and we stayed buddies. We didn't see each other a lot because we moved in different circles, of course. I was married and having kids, 1 a year, and he was still playing the field. But we did on Sunday afternoons a few times, played touch football. Actually, it was flag football. Because to stop somebody or to stop a play, you had to grab somebody's towel off their, or flag, off their pants or out of their belt. Yeah. You know, we were like just Tennessee boys that had become buddies. We were friendly competitors, but we were competitors. And in that time, I don't know, he had hit after hit, but so did I. And we bumped each other out of the number 1 spot several times. And matching each other hit for hit. Thank goodness, as I say, I had an 11-month head start. I cherish that. It was a great, exciting time.
Now, he was raised, I understand, in Assemblies of God Church. Did he, you know, when you met him, did he talk about his faith or anything?
Not in the beginning, no. I learned all this later, reading the same magazines and publications. And eventually, though, when he had become a very big star, and I went to see him at his opening at the International Hotel in Las Vegas. Big deal. People came from all over the world. And between the shows, we were visiting in his dressing room, big, huge dressing room, and a big walk-in closet. He says, can I talk to you a minute? And so I said, yeah. We go back in the closet. He says, do you know Oral Roberts? And I said, yes, I do. He said, I'd like to talk to her sometime. Would you put in a word for me? I said, let me give you a clue, Elvis. Your name is Elvis Presley. All you have to do is pick up the phone, call Oral Roberts University, say, I'd like to talk to President Roberts. I guarantee he'll be on the phone in 30 seconds. Oh, no, I said, I wouldn't do that. He said, I don't know him. And again, that shows that he was a shy, respectful guy innately. Mm-hmm. He was a great performer, but, you know, when it came to social interaction, but he let me know. He said, I wish I could go to church like you do. And I said, you can. Why not? He says, I said, you know, they all want my autographs, and they're looking at me and not the preacher. And I said, look, that happens to me too. But once people see that you're listening and you're worshiping, you're there for the same reason they are, they'll leave you alone. And you don't mind people looking at you. You're used to that, aren't you? And he said, I just don't think I could do it. I think I'd interrupt things. I said, look, for a while in church, didn't want to sign autographs, after church even, because I thought it was out of character, out of place or something. But then I realized these kids, mainly, that were asking for autographs would take it to school and say, look what I got. Where'd you get that? At church. Church? Was Pat Boone at your church? Yeah. What is that church? Can I go with you? I mean, it could be a very good thing. Sure. And it would be that and more with you. He never did that, but I did call Oral Roberts, and he did come out and meet with him, and so did Rex Humbard, because he wanted to meet and talk with both. So I knew he was on this spiritual quest. He knew with all his fame, all his success, that he wanted that sense of closeness to the Lord that he knew as a boy with his parents in church, and he just never let himself come out of the cocoon that Colonel Tom Parker had sort of built around him and that he was more comfortable in. So when he wanted to be with people, he invited them to wherever he was. If they wanted to bowl, he rented the bowling alley after midnight. Or if he wanted to see a movie, he'd rent the theater. And again, they'd go in after the place was normally closed, just with his own little group.
And I understand he loved to sing gospel music.
He did. He many times. And, of course, I had a couple of buddies that were in his group. Charlie Hodge was a guitar player and close to him, and a good singer, a gospel quartet singer. Tony Brown, a producer, worked with Elvis and the Stamps Quartet and the Imperials. And he would, after his 2 shows, if he did 2 shows or if one, but they'd gather around a piano backstage or somewhere and sing till 3 or 4 in the morning. And he loved singing the gospel music. Eventually, of course, he wound up including How Great Thou Art in his concerts toward the end. He was singing better than most of us realized he ever could, because this is a demanding kind of a song to sing, but he sang it with great fervor. You know, I heard, Dan, that he, in this quest, was thinking of turning his concerts into something of a evangelistic outreach, still doing his music like Bob Dylan had, and then singing gospel songs and maybe saying something about his own faith and making an altar call for those who wanted to come. However, he had been infected by his buddies and others with Eastern and mystic religions, and he wanted to combine all of those into whatever message he would give. This could be wrong, but I think the Lord mercifully took him before he started something that could have been extremely misleading to a lot of young people who dote on anything he said or did, and they still do. I mean, there are some who actually almost worship Elvis himself. That influence, heading people in a nebulous, well-meaning, diffused kind of mixed-up Christian message would have been not good.
Most of our listeners have probably never had women scream at them, chasing them, whatever, had to have security. I mean, you went in one direction, Pat. You were very, very famous, and you had all these things happening. Why were you okay, but Elvis went way off the track?
I know the answers to that. One is my faith, of course. I raised in a Christian home, as was Elvis, but I never was comfortable not being in worship service on Sundays. Even if I were traveling, and at first I always found a church wherever I was, if there was one. And if we weren't, let's say I would be on an intercontinental flight Sundays. My buddy and I, Christian, we would have communion together on the plane. I was that serious, always was. Of course, I led singing. I didn't just attend services. Quite often, either they asked me to speak or teach a Sunday school class, or more likely lead the congregational singing, which in my church background, Church of Christ, was a cappella. We didn't have a piano or any kind of instrumental music. And so I was used to just opening the hymn book and with my hand making motions to indicate the beat or the tempo, lead a congregation of 500-600 people, even without a microphone, in congregational worship. So I did that my whole career. And when we lived in New York, we lived out in New Jersey, but we would come across to a church in New York, in the city, 48 East 80th, and I'd be in church services Sunday morning, quite often Sunday night, wherever possible, on a Wednesday night with our kids, Sunday school. So this was a constant anchor. But then my marriage to a wonderful woman and my kids and Christian friends. So, I had no excuse whatsoever. I had plenty of opportunity to go in the wrong directions, but no excuse to do it because I had the continual reminders. Plus, I've always been a Bible student, and I learned to read in college. My language was New Testament Greek. So I learned to read the New Testament laboriously with my Greek texts and the glossaries and so on, and I could read the New Testament in the original Greek.
Wow.
Now I've lost that ability. I still have the books, but being steeped as I was and continued to be in the Word, it really kept me constantly aware of what my real function in life was, and all the screaming and all the popularity and all the fame and money and everything else was God's gift to me. I loved it. I cherished it, really, but I knew there had to be a purpose more than just my own comfort or enjoyment. So I made the statement many times that I felt like a performer any performer who has influence, and that's almost anybody, has a responsibility to make his influence good on those who will watch or maybe emulate. And others thought that was, Frank Sinatra said, I don't owe anybody anything but a good performance. and Charles Barkley said, I'm not a role model. I don't want to be a role model. Well, you are whether you want to be or not. And so I always felt that was an extra, really, benefit to me.
But with Elvis, he seemed to surround himself with all these yes people who were dependent on him, and none of them seemed to be able to tell him to stop doing all these things.
Right. He wasn't taking hard drugs. I never heard any allegation that he did that. But he did, he was hyper in many ways, so he would take sleeping pills to sleep. Then he'd be drowsy and drugged feeling when he got up, so he'd take what we call uppers. And he got to where he was very dependent on both. And he did go into, not many people knew it, I only heard of it, going into some rehab, maybe a year and a half before he died. But it apparently didn't work as far as these prescription items that he could get from. There was a doctor or two who kept him supplied. And it wasn't in fact, one time, Dan, in one of our meetings in the dressing room closet, different one, he showed me his NARC badge. President Nixon, he went to see the president and expressed his concern about drug usage among kids. And President Nixon officially made him a narcotics agent, gave him a badge and a card. And I had to laugh at that because I thought, well, you're not out there among people. How can you possibly, do the drug department any good? You're not mixing and mingling with the kids themselves. And therefore you don't meet any hard drug dealers. But still, that showed that he was concerned. However, secretly or privately, he was hooked on these prescription drugs, which eventually took his life.
Now, the reason we're here, Pat, that is so interesting. But then you had an absolutely awful experience with your grandson, Ryan. And this is how we first got together, finding out, first of all, what happened to Ryan.
Well, it was 2001, June 19th. He was engaged to be married in November, just graduated from Pepperdine University with honors, had written his first screenplay. He wanted to be a writer and maybe producer, handsome enough to be an actor, but that was not his goal. And he went up on the roof of a building in the western part of Los Angeles, where he's sharing a room with two of his buddies from Pepperdine until he would be married in November. And they went up on a hot June day to get some sun on the roof with towels and boom box to hear music and something cool to drink. And they went up and through a door onto this roof, and there was a skylight set in the roof, a very large rectangular white plexiglass sheet that allowed light into the four-story or three-story lobby of this apartment building, and it was not marked and it wasn't guarded. And the owners of the building knew that kids were going up there to lie in the sun, and they didn't even do anything to prevent them from stepping on the plexiglass. They just assumed people wouldn't do it. And Elvis, certainly Ryan never intended to, but they were wearing flip-flops, and he must have stubbed his toe or got too close, and it just sort of turned his ankle. And the buddy who went up with him, Steve Sawalich, had turned to close the door that they'd just come up through, and he heard the crash, and Ryan was gone. He fell 40 feet through the skylight to a concrete floor. And Steve called the paramedics, called Shirley. Thank God the paramedics were there in just a very few minutes. Picked him up off the floor. He was in a pool of blood and unconscious, and they thought he's dying. He's in the throes of death. But thank God again, they gave him electrical shock to try to get his heart pumping. Took him to UCLA emergency. Shirley was there when the van had just taken him in, and the motor still running, and she saw one of the paramedics stroll out lighting a cigarette. She said, "I think you just took my grandson in there. How is he?" The guy shook his head. "Don't get your hopes up, lady. He's gone, or he's gone." Wow. Well, Shirley said she felt almost a voice. It was not audible, but it was so distinct. She knew it was from the Lord. He will live and not die and declare the glory of God. And we eventually found it's in the 118th Psalm. We didn't know, but we clung to that, and it's now been 12 years. And he was in a coma for 7 months. It's been a long, laborious process to reclaim him, but, he's so far beyond anything the doctors thought would ever be possible. And he works so patiently with the therapist. He's still 6'4", 210 pounds, great looking, good sense of humor. And he'll be here at the golf tournament we're hosting for Ryan's Reach, named for him, a foundation that we established to help other families, not ours, other families with brain-injured loved ones. And so Ryan will be here, and he knows it's in his honor. And who knows, I may get him to say something to everybody. He's certainly capable. And he laughs, and he enjoys the company. And he, as I say, if you go to YouTube, type in Ryan Corbin walking, you see him taking tortured but purposeful steps on a walker. And the more he does that, the easier it will become. And we still believe he's gonna walk and be normal, and certainly verbally declare the glory of God.
That's so amazing. I remember you went on with Larry King, a Jewish gentleman. And why did Larry King take such interest in Ryan?
Well, the Bible says in 1 Corinthians that the Gentile seeks God through wisdom, but the Jew requires a sign, like Gideon and others of the Old Testament characters. They said, if this is really from God, then give me some assurance I'm hearing from God. Give me a sign, preferably miraculous. And Larry has said, and I knew this, he had said this many times to ministers, to Billy Graham, to Jim Baker, to Oral Roberts, various ministers, and even performers like Naomi Judd and others, and then me. I envy you people with your faith. Like I really wish I could have it, but for this Jewish kid from Brooklyn, I've never made the connection. And he and I got to know each other well, and I know now why this difficulty is, because his own father, a Jewish immigrant, dropped dead in a factory where he was working when Larry was about 7 or 8 years old. He left his mom and 2 boys to raise. And so for him, it's the question he always asks: if God's all-knowing, all-loving, all-powerful, why does he let terrible things happen to good people? What he's asking is, why did God let my father die and leave my mother and us boys alone to make our way when he could have stopped it? And that's, it's a question that so many ask, and I've given him a couple of answers, and others have, but so far it just never has connected for him, as he says. But he's still searching and wishing he did have a connection that he could have confidence in. And so when he heard this had happened to my grandson, instantly he had somebody call me and ask if I'd like to come on his program and ask people to pray.
That's absolutely amazing. Well, we're speaking with Pat Boone, who is actually wearing a kilt. Never quite seen it. And Pat, just before we go, what's the website for Ryan's Reach?
It's just ryansreach.com. And please come there and visit, and you'll see Ryan and know more about, not just about him and about us, but the family, because the whole family's been extremely supportive. And then you know more about High Hopes, the clinic that's helped him so much and is the chief beneficiary of Ryan's Reach. What we do with the monies that are raised in the golf tournament, Dove Dash, 10K, 5K run, walk event every year, the monies create what we call scholarships in the High Hopes Clinic for brain-injured loved ones who sometimes other clinics and therapists have given up on, but High Hopes doesn't. Wonderful. And they take people that have been so seriously, even hurt worse than Ryan, and work with them and give them therapy and confidence and TLC, tender loving care, and help them achieve more than they could have without that kind of support. And it's very heartening, very encouraging. And in some cases, they get people back into productive life, able to hold jobs and do things that the medical profession didn't think were possible.
Wow. Well, I'd like to thank you, Pat. It's been a delight, even though you're wearing a kilt. Delight to talk with you, and God bless you. And again, RyansReach.com is where you go.
Yep, that's the place. Please do. Come see us.